I was 7 months pregnant when I walked into my bedroom and saw my husband in bed with another woman. But that wasn't the part that destroyed me, because the woman lying next to him was my mother. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My baby kicked inside me like she could feel my heart breaking, and I just stood there, frozen, watching my entire life collapse in seconds. But what I didn't know was that this betrayal was only the beginning, because days later, I would discover something even more shocking. The woman I called mother wasn't my mother at all, and the truth about who I really am would change everything. Hi, I'm Ray. Welcome to my channel, Tales of the Heart by Ray. I am glad to have you as part of my community. Please comment where you are watching from. I would like to know. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more beautiful and interesting stories.
That morning had started like any other. I woke up with a dull ache in my lower back, the kind that comes with carrying life inside you for months. My hand instinctively rested on my stomach, feeling the soft curve that had become my entire world. My baby kicked lightly, and I smiled. "You're awake already?" I whispered. Moments like that made everything feel worth it. The sleepless nights, the swollen feet, the constant exhaustion. I was going to be a mother, and I wasn't doing it alone. Or at least, that's what I believed. David had already left for work that morning. He kissed my forehead before leaving, like he always did. It had become routine, comfortable, predictable, safe. "I'll see you tonight," he said. I didn't know then that those words would echo in my mind for a long time. After he left, I got ready for my prenatal appointment. My mother had called earlier to remind me not to forget my vitamins. She had been doing that a lot lately, checking on me, visiting often, making sure everything was perfect. At the time, I thought it was love. Now I know better. The hospital visit went smoothly. The doctor smiled as she adjusted the monitor. "Your baby is very healthy," she said. "Strong heartbeat." I felt relief flood through me. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Not the discomfort, not the stress, just that tiny heartbeat echoing through the room. On my way home, I felt unusually happy. Maybe it was the good news, maybe it was the hormones, or maybe it was because I thought my life was still whole. I decided to surprise David. He loved surprises, especially food. I stopped by his favorite restaurant and ordered his favorite meal: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and that spicy sauce he always joked he couldn't live without. As I waited, I found myself smiling for no reason. I imagined his reaction, the way his face would light up, the way he'd wrap his arms around me, careful of my belly. Simple happiness. That's all I wanted. When I got home, the first thing I noticed was my mother's car parked outside. I didn't think much of it. She had been visiting almost every day since my pregnancy started. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she just sat with me and talked. She said she didn't want me to feel alone. Looking back now, I wonder who she was really visiting. I stepped out of the car slowly, balancing the food carefully in my hands. The afternoon air felt unusually still, too still. As I walked toward the front door, something felt off. It wasn't something I could explain, just a quiet discomfort creeping under my skin. The house was silent when I entered. No TV, no footsteps, no voices. That alone was strange. My mother was not a quiet person. "Mom?" I called out, no response. I frowned slightly and walked further inside. "David?" I added, even though I knew he was supposed to be at work. Still nothing. That's when I heard it. A sound, soft, faint, almost like whispering. I froze. The sound was coming from upstairs. From my bedroom, my heart began to beat faster. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the TV was on. Maybe my mom was on a phone call. Maybe I was just overthinking. But then I heard it again. A laugh. Low, intimate. Not the kind of laugh you hear in casual conversation. The kind that makes your stomach twist without knowing why. My grip tightened around the food bag. My feet started moving before my mind could catch up. Step by step, I climbed the stairs. Each step heavier than the last, each breath shorter than the one before. The closer I got to the bedroom door, the clearer the sounds became. Whispers, movement, a muffled giggle. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. No, I whispered to myself. No, it's not what you think, but deep down, something inside me already knew. I reached the door. My hand hovered over the handle. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was like my body was trying to protect me. Like some instinct was screaming, "Don't open it. Your life will never be the same again," but I ignored it. Slowly, I pushed the door open. And in that single moment, my entire world collapsed. There they were, on my bed, my husband, and my mother. Their bodies tangled together under the sheets that I had washed just 2 days before. The same bed I slept in every night. The same bed where I carried our child. For a few seconds, everything went silent, no sound, no movement. Just three people frozen in a moment that should have never existed. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Because that was my husband. And that was my mother. Two people who were never supposed to cross that line. Two people I trusted more than anyone in the world. And yet, there they were. Reality, undeniable and cruel. My hands dropped to my stomach instinctively, as if trying to shield my baby from what my eyes had just seen. And then, she kicked, a small, gentle movement. But in that moment, it felt like everything inside me broke. Like even my child could feel the pain tearing through me. My breath became uneven, shallow, sharp. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching the life I believed in turn into something unrecognizable. My mother was the first to react. She jumped out of the bed, grabbing the sheets to cover herself. "Maya," she shouted. Her voice wasn't soft. It wasn't apologetic, it was panicked, almost angry. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. David didn't move, he just sat there, silent, avoiding my eyes. And somehow, that silence hurt more than anything else. Because it told me the truth. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something that just happened. This was something that had been happening. For a long time. Finally, I found my voice. It came out weak, broken, barely above a whisper. "How long?" Neither of them answered. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. "How long has this been going on?" I asked again, louder this time. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. David still couldn't look at me, and in that moment, I knew. Before they even said it, before any explanation came, I knew the truth was worse than anything they could say, and I wasn't ready for it. But it was coming anyway. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating, like even oxygen had abandoned me. I stood there, still holding the bag of food I had brought with so much love just minutes ago. It suddenly felt heavy in my hands, like a cruel joke I didn't understand anymore. "How long?" I repeated, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay steady. This time, David shifted. He dragged his hand across his face, still refusing to look at me. That Oslone said more than words ever could. Guilt hung on him like a shadow, but it wasn't enough to make him speak. It was my mother who answered. "A few months," she said quickly, her voice sharp, defensive. "It's not what you think, Maya. A few months." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. My knees weakened slightly, and I instinctively held onto the doorframe for support. A few months meant this didn't just start yesterday. It didn't start last week. It had been happening while I carried his child, while I trusted them, while I loved them. "A few months," I echoed, my voice hollow. So, while I was pregnant, neither of them denied it. That silence confirmed everything. I let out a small, broken laugh, but there was no humor in it, just disbelief, just pain. "You both watched me grow this baby," I said, my voice rising now. "You watched me struggle, and you still—" "Maya, stop," my mother snapped suddenly. Her tone shocked me more than the betrayal. There was no remorse in it, no shame, just irritation. "I said it's not what you think," she continued, folding her arms as if she was the one in control of the situation. "Things have been complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, staring at her like I didn't recognize the woman in front of me. This woman who raised me. This woman I had loved my entire life. "Yes," she said, her voice growing colder. "You haven't exactly been easy to live with lately." The words hit me like another slap. "What did you just say?" My heart pounded harder, not just from the betrayal, but from the sudden shift. This wasn't an apology, this wasn't regret, this was blame. You've been emotional, she continued, her tone almost dismissive. Always tired, always complaining. David has been under a lot of pressure, too. I stared at her, completely stunned. Pressure? I whispered. He's under pressure. So he sleeps with my mother, David finally spoke. Please, Maya. Just calm down, he muttered. Calm down. The words ignited something inside me. Calm down, I snapped, my voice breaking as tears filled my eyes. I just found my husband in bed with my mother, and you're telling me to calm down? He flinched slightly, but still didn't meet my gaze, and in that moment something inside me shifted. Not just pain, not just heartbreak, but clarity. They weren't sorry. Not really. They were uncomfortable, because they had been caught. I stepped further into the room, my hands shaking now as I placed the food bag on the dresser. I want the truth, I said firmly. All of it. Another silence. Long, heavy. Then David finally exhaled. It just happened, he said weakly. No, I replied immediately. Things like this don't just happen. He swallowed hard. It started when your mom began coming over more often, he admitted quietly. We talked a lot. She understood things you didn't. I felt my stomach twist. Understood what? I asked. He hesitated. You changed, Maya, he said. After the pregnancy, everything became about the baby. You stopped paying attention to me. The words were like poison. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. I'm carrying your child, I said slowly, and that's your excuse. He didn't respond, because there was no defense for what he had done. But what came next hurt even more. My mother stepped forward, her expression hard. Enough of this drama, she said sharply. Crying won't change anything. I blinked at her. Drama? I whispered. Yes, she said. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Bigger than it needs to be. My chest tightened painfully. I caught my husband and my mother in bed, I said, my voice trembling. How is that not big? She rolled her eyes slightly, and that small gesture shattered something deep inside me. You need to think rationally, she continued. This house belongs to me. I allowed you both to live here. I froze. What does that have to do with anything? It means, she said coldly, that if you can't accept the situation, you can leave. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Leave? I'm 7 months pregnant, I said, my voice barely audible. And, she replied without hesitation, that single word felt like a knife to my chest. And you expect me to just walk out, I asked, disbelief flooding my voice. You're the one causing a scene, she snapped. If you can't behave maturely, then yes. Leave, I turned to David, desperate. Hoping, just hoping somewhere inside him there was still a man who cared. David, I said softly. Tell her this is wrong. He stayed silent. That silence was my answer. Tears spilled down my cheeks now, uncontrollable. I'm your wife, I said. I'm carrying your child. He looked away. I think it's better if you go for now, he muttered. And just like that, it was over. Not with a fight, not with an apology, but with rejection. Cold, final. I felt something inside me collapse completely. Without another word, I turned around and walked out of the room. Out of the house. Out of the life I thought I had. I didn't pack anything. Didn't take my clothes. Didn't take my memories. Because none of it felt real anymore. The moment I stepped outside, the world felt different. Colder. Darker. Empty. I walked down the street slowly, my vision blurred by tears. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was carrying not just my child, but the weight of everything that had just happened. Cars passed by, people moved around, life continued. But for me, everything had stopped. I wrapped my arms around my stomach protectively. I'm here, I whispered softly to my baby. I'm still here. But inside, I didn't feel strong. I felt broken. Alone. Abandoned by the two people who were supposed to love me the most. The sky began to darken as evening approached. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even have a plan. I just kept walking, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling was unbearable. The streets grew quieter as night fell. The air turned colder against my skin. My legs began to ache, but I kept moving anyway, until suddenly, a car slowed down beside me. I froze. Fear immediately gripped my chest. The window rolled down slowly, and a woman leaned slightly toward me. Hey, are you okay? She asked gently. Her voice was soft, concerned, different from the harshness I had just left behind. I hesitated. My instinct told me to be careful, but something about her eyes, something about the way she looked at me, made me pause. I'm fine, I said quickly, though my voice betrayed me. She didn't believe me. I can see you're not, she said calmly. Please, just let me help you. I took a step back. I don't know you. I know, she replied, and that's okay. But you don't look safe out here, especially not in your condition. Her eyes dropped briefly to my stomach, then up, back to my face. There was no judgment there, only concern, and for the first time since everything happened, I felt something unexpected, not fear, not pain, but a small, fragile sense of safety. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that single decision to stop walking, was about to change my life forever. For a few seconds, I just stood there. The streetlight above flickered faintly, casting uneven shadows across the pavement. The woman in the car didn't rush me. She didn't pressure me. She simply waited, her hands resting calmly on the steering wheel, her eyes steady, patient. That alone made her different. After everything I had just been through, I had expected the world to feel harsh, cruel, unsafe, but there was something about her presence that felt warm. I won't hurt you, she said softly, as if she could sense the storm inside my mind. You don't even have to tell me anything. Just let me help you sit down somewhere safe. I swallowed hard. My body ached, my feet were sore, my heart felt like it had been torn open and left exposed, and I was tired, so tired. Finally, I gave a small nod. Okay, I whispered. Relief flickered across her face, but she hid it quickly. She stepped out of the car and walked around to my side, moving slowly, careful not to startle me. I'm Evelyn, she said gently. Maya, I replied. She opened the passenger door for me, her movements calm and respectful, like she understood I needed control in that moment. As I eased myself into the seat, I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, hesitation, but also a quiet sense of trust I couldn't explain. She closed the door gently and got back into the driver's seat. I know a place nearby, she said. It's quiet. I nodded again, too drained to speak. The car moved slowly through the streets, the silence between us surprisingly comfortable. I stared out the window, watching blurred lights pass by, trying not to think about what had just happened, but it kept replaying. The bed, their faces, their silence. I pressed my lips together, fighting back another wave of tears. Do you want to talk about it? Evelyn asked softly, keeping her eyes on the road. I hesitated, then shook my head. Not yet. That's okay, she said. You don't have to. And just like that, she let the silence return. No pressure, no questions, just presence. A few minutes later, we pulled up to a small cafe tucked between two buildings. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm. Light spilled gently through the windows, and there were only a few people inside. Safe. That's what it felt like. Evelyn stepped out first and helped me out of the car. Take your time, she said as I adjusted myself carefully. Inside, the cafe smelled like coffee and fresh bread. A quiet hum of soft music played in the background. It felt like a different world from the chaos I had just left behind. We sat at a corner table. Evelyn ordered tea for both of us without even asking, and somehow, that felt right. For a while, neither of us spoke. I just sat there, staring at the table, trying to gather the broken pieces of myself. Then suddenly, my baby kicked again. I gasped slightly, placing my hand on my stomach. Evelyn noticed immediately. Is everything okay? She asked, leaning forward. I nodded, managing a small smile. She's just reminding me she's here. Evelyn's expression softened instantly. She repeated gently. Yes, I said quietly, I'm having a girl. Something changed in her eyes at that moment, something deeper, warmer, almost emotional. That's beautiful, she whispered. I looked down at my stomach again, my fingers tracing small circles. She's the only reason I'm still standing right now, I admitted. Evelyn didn't respond immediately, but I felt her watching me, studying me, not in a strange way, but in a way that felt searching. Then her gaze shifted, slowly, carefully, to my neck. At first, as I didn't notice, but her silence stretched a little too long. I looked up. She was staring at me. More specifically, at the small birthmark just below my collarbone. Her eyes widened slightly, and something in her exchange changed. Confusion, shock, disbelief. Is something wrong? I asked, instinctively touching my neck. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned forward just a little, as if trying to get a closer look. "That mark," she said slowly. My heart skipped. "What about it?" She hesitated, like she was fighting an internal battle. Then finally, "Were you born in New York General Hospital?" she asked. The question caught me completely off guard. "What?" I frowned. "Yes, I think so. That's what I've always been told." The moment the words left my mouth, her breath hitched. Her hand moved to her chest slightly, like she was trying to steady herself. "Oh my God," she whispered. A strange tension filled the space between us. My pulse quickened. "Why are you asking me that?" I said, my voice cautious now. Evelyn looked at me again, really looked at me this time, not like a stranger, but like someone trying to recognize something or someone. "Because," she began, her trembling slightly, "25 years ago, I gave birth to a baby girl in that hospital." I felt my chest tighten, and, I asked slowly, she swallowed hard. "And she had the exact same birthmark, silence, heavy, unmoving." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process what she had just said. "That doesn't mean anything," I said quickly, shaking my head. "A lot of people have birthmarks." But even as I said it, something inside me shifted. A small, unsettling thought began to form. Evelyn nodded slowly. "You're right," she said. It could be a coincidence, but her eyes said otherwise. There was too much emotion there, too much certainty. "What happened to your daughter?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her expression changed instantly, pain, raw, unfiltered. "She was taken," Evelyn said quietly. "Stolen from the hospital just hours after she was born." A chill ran down my spine. "Stolen? Yes," she whispered. "One moment she was there, and the next, she was gone." I felt my fingers curl slightly against the table. "That's horrible. It destroyed me," she admitted. "I searched for years. I hired investigators. I followed every lead." Her voice broke slightly. "But I never found her. I didn't know what to say." The air between us felt charged now, heavy with something neither of us fully understood yet. "This is crazy," I said softly, more to myself than to her. "There's no way." Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "I'm not saying anything for sure," she said carefully. "But would you be willing to take a DNA test?" My heart started pounding. A DNA test. This was no longer just a strange conversation. This was real. This was life-changing. I hesitated. Everything inside me felt uncertain, confused, overwhelmed. Just hours ago, I had lost everything. And now, something completely unexpected was being in front of me, a possibility. A question, a truth I wasn't ready to face. "I don't know," I admitted. Evelyn nodded gently. "That's okay," she said. "You don't have to decide right now." She reached across the table slowly, placing her hand near mine, but not touching it, giving me the choice. "But if there's even a chance," she added softly, "don't you think you deserve to know who you really are?" Those stayed with me. Who you really are. I looked down at my hands, at my stomach, at the life growing inside me, and for the first time that night, I felt something different. Not pain, not anger, but something quiet, something uncertain. Something that felt like the beginning of a truth I never knew existed. I took a slow breath. Then finally, I looked up at her. "Okay," I said. Agreeing to the DNA test felt like stepping into the unknown. That single word, "okay," hung in the air long after I said it. It wasn't just an answer. It was a decision that could unravel everything I thought I knew about myself. Evelyn didn't rush me after that. She simply nodded, her expression soft but deeply emotional, like she was trying to hold herself together. "Thank you," she whispered. I wasn't sure what I had just agreed to. All I knew was that my life had already fallen apart once that day, and somehow I had found the strength to risk breaking it again. The next morning came too quickly. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same images: my husband, my mother, that bed. And just when I thought my mind would finally rest, a new thought would creep in. What if she's telling the truth? I sat up slowly, my hand resting to stomach. My baby shifted gently and I exhaled. "You're all I have right now," I whispered. But deep down, I knew that might not be true anymore. Evelyn picked me up early. She had insisted on taking me herself. "You shouldn't go through this alone," she said. Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten. No one had said those words to me in a long time. The clinic was quiet. Too quiet. Every sound felt louder than it should. The ticking clock, the soft footsteps, even my own breathing. As we sat in the waiting area, I noticed Evelyn's hands. They were steady, but only on the surface. Her fingers tapped lightly against her purse over and over again. She was nervous, terrified even. I turned to her. "Have you ever done this before?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No," she admitted. "But I've imagined it. Thousands of times." That answer stayed with me. Because for me, this was sudden, unexpected. But for her, this moment had been building for 20 years. When they finally called us in, my heart started pounding again. The nurse explained the process. Simple, quick, nothing complicated. A swab, a sample, a result. But what she didn't say was what it could do to us, how it could change everything. When it was my turn, I sat in the chair, gripping the edge tightly. The nurse smiled gently. "Just relax," she said. "Relax." I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded. As the swab brushed the inside of my cheek, I felt something strange. Not pain, not fear, but a quiet realization. This small moment was about to answer a question I didn't even know I had until yesterday. Evelyn went next. She didn't speak, but I saw the way her eyes briefly closed as the test was taken, like she was making a silent prayer. And just like that, it was done. No dramatic moment, no immediate answers, just waiting. "The results will take a few days," the nurse said. A few days. It sounded simple, but it felt endless. The drive back was different, quieter, heavier. We were no longer strangers having a strange conversation. Now, we were two people connected by a possibility neither of us could ignore. That afternoon, Evelyn insisted I stay with her. "At least until you figure things out," she said. I hesitated at first. Everything was happening so fast. But the truth was, I had nowhere else to go. So I said yes. Her home was nothing like I expected. It wasn't just big, it was breathtaking, elegant, peaceful. Every detail carefully chosen. But what stood out the most was how empty it felt. Not physically, but emotionally, like something had always been missing. "This is your room," she said, opening a door gently. The space was warm, comfortable, prepared, almost like it had been waiting. "You can stay as long as you need," she added. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Thank you." That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Instead, memories began to surface, small things. Little moments I had ignored before, like how my mother never liked talking about my birth. How she would change the subject whenever I asked questions about my early years. How there were no baby photos before a certain age. How sometimes she looked at me in a way that felt distant. At the time, I never questioned it. Because she was my mother, that was enough. Or at least, my hand rested on my stomach again. "Who am I?" I whispered into the darkness. The question felt heavier now, more real, more urgent. The next few days passed slowly. Painfully slowly. Each hour stretched longer than the last. I tried to distract myself. Reading, walking, even watching television. But nothing worked. Because everything led back to the same thought. What if? Evelyn was careful. She didn't push, didn't ask too many questions. But I could feel it. The hope, the fear, the silent prayers she never said out loud. On the third day, the call came. We were sitting in the living room when her phone rang. The moment she saw the caller ID, her entire body stiffened. "It's the clinic," she said quietly. My heart stopped, she answered. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, too calm. I watched her face closely. Every second felt like a lifetime. At first, there was nothing, just listening. Then her expression changed, her eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly. And then, tears, my chest tightened instantly. "What did they say?" I asked, my voice barely holding together. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she slowly lowered the phone, her hands trembling now. Then she looked at me. Not like a stranger, not like a possibility, but like something certain, something real. "You're my daughter," she whispered. The words hit me like a wave. Strong, overwhelming. I shook my head slightly. "No, that's not possible." But even as I said it, my voice broke. Because deep down I already knew. "The results confirmed it," she said, tears streaming down her face now. 100% match. My vision blurred, my heart raced. My entire world shifted again. But this time, in a completely different way, everything I thought I knew was wrong. The woman who raised me was not my mother. And the woman sitting in front of me, the stranger who stopped her car for me that night, was my real mother. I covered my mouth, overwhelmed. I don't understand. She stepped closer slowly, carefully, like I might break. I've been looking for you my whole life, she said softly. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel alone. But deep down, a new question began to form. If she was my real mother, then who was the woman who raised me and what had she done to take me? Honestly, guys, this is so much to take in. Comment below how you feel and what you would do if it were you. I would love to read everyone's comments. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the truth was spoken out loud, even after the DNA results confirmed it, my mind refused to accept it fully. You're my daughter. Those words echoed over and over again in my head, refusing to settle into something real. I lay in the soft bed Evelyn had given me, staring at the ceiling, my hand resting protectively over my stomach. My baby moved gently, as if reminding me that no matter what changed, she was still here. But everything else felt like it had been rewritten. Morning came slowly, too slowly. I sat by the window, watching the sunlight creep across the floor, trying to piece together my identity from fragments that no longer made sense. Every memory I had, every moment from my childhood, now felt suspicious, distorted, like a story had been told instead of a life I had actually lived. Evelyn found me there. She didn't say anything at first. She simply stood a few steps behind me, as if unsure whether to approach. That hesitation, that careful distance. It said more than words ever could. She was afraid. Afraid of overwhelming me, afraid of losing me again. You didn't sleep? She said softly. It wasn't a question. I shook my head slightly. I kept thinking. I whispered. She stepped closer. So did I for a moment. We just stood there in silence. Two people connected by blood, but separated by 25 years of lies. Who is she? I finally asked. My voice was quiet, but steady. Because I needed the truth now, all of it. Evelyn exhaled slowly. We never found out, she admitted. Not completely. I turned to face her. What do you mean? She hesitated, then walked toward a nearby drawer. From it, she pulled out a thin file, old, worn, but carefully preserved. I kept everything, she said. She handed it to me. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were documents, reports, photos, newspaper clippings. The headline of one article caught my eye immediately. Newborn baby disappears from New York General Hospital. My breath caught. That was you, Evelyn said gently. I swallowed hard, continuing to read. The article described chaos, a missing infant, security failures, an investigation that led nowhere. No suspects, no answers. Just a baby gone. There were a few theories, Evelyn continued. One of them was that someone working at the hospital may have been involved. A chill ran down my spine. Someone working there? I repeated. She nodded. But there was never enough evidence to prove anything. I looked down at the file again, my hands tightened slightly, because something didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. My mother, I said slowly, the word now feeling strange in my mouth. She used to avoid talking about my birth. Evelyn's expression sharpened. What do you mean? She never gave details, I explained. No stories, no photos from when I was a newborn. Nothing. Evelyn's eyes darkened slightly. That's not normal, she said. No, I agreed quietly. It's not. A heavy silence settled between us, and then a thought hit me. Sudden, sharp, unavoidable. What if? I started, my voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn leaned closer. What if she knew? I finished. The room felt colder, like the truth was slowly stepping into the light. Evelyn didn't respond immediately, but I saw it in her eyes. She had already thought of it, many times. There's something else, she said carefully. My heart tightened. What? She hesitated, then spoke. The woman who raised you. I held my breath. What was her profession? I froze, because suddenly, everything clicked. She told me she used to work in healthcare, I said slowly. Not a doctor, but something like support staff. Evelyn's face went pale. What kind of support staff? I don't know exactly, I admitted. She never went into details. But deep down, I remembered something, a memory I had ignored before. As a child, I once saw an old photo. It was only for a second, but I remembered the uniform, white, simple, with a hospital badge. She worked at a hospital, I said finally. The words felt heavy, real, dangerous. Evelyn stepped back slightly, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God. The truth was beginning to form. Not fully clear yet, but close enough to feel. If she worked there, Evelyn whispered, her voice shaking, then she had access. My chest tightened painfully. Access, opportunity, silence. She raised me, I said slowly. She watched me grow up. Evelyn nodded, tears forming again. While I searched for you, the weight of that reality crushed me. 2 lives. Running parallel, never meeting, because of one woman. The same woman who had just thrown me out like I meant nothing. Anger rose inside me, strong. Hot, uncontrollable. She betrayed me twice, I said, my voice shaking now. First by stealing me, and then by destroying my life. Evelyn stepped closer. You didn't deserve any of this, she said firmly. But this time, I didn't feel like crying. I felt something else. Something new. Strength. I want the truth, I said. Evelyn nodded immediately. Then we'll find it. And just like that, this wasn't just about survival anymore. It became something bigger. Justice. Days later, Evelyn contacted a private investigator. Not just anyone, but one of the best. Someone who had worked on cold cases. Someone who knew how to uncover buried truths. This won't be easy, he warned during our first meeting. If she was involved, she's been hiding it for decades. I don't care how long it takes, I said. I just want the truth. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, he said, let's start digging. As the investigation began, more pieces started falling into place. Records, old employment files, witness accounts, and then something unexpected surfaced. There's a name that keeps coming up, the investigator said one afternoon. My heart skipped. What name? He looked at his notes, then at me. The woman who raised you, my breath caught, was working at New York General Hospital the night the baby went missing. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. And just like that, the truth was no longer a possibility. It was real. The woman I called Mother was no victim. She was the reason my life had been stolen. The truth didn't break me. It changed me. There's a difference. Before, I was reacting, crying, questioning, trying to understand why my life had collapsed so suddenly. But now I wasn't confused anymore. I was certain. The woman I had called Mother for 25 years hadn't just betrayed me recently. She had built my entire life on a lie. And somehow, that realization didn't make me feel weak. It made me feel powerful. I stood in front of the mirror that morning, staring at my reflection. For the first time in days, my eyes looked different. Still tired. Still swollen from everything I had been through. But no longer lost. There was something else there now, clarity. And beneath that, a quiet, steady strength. Behind me, Evelyn watched silently. She had learned to give me space when I needed it, but I could feel her presence. Steady, protective, constant. Are you sure you're ready for this? She asked gently. I met her gaze through the mirror. No, I said honestly. Then I turned to face her fully. But I'm not running anymore. The plan was simple. Go back, face them. Look them in the eyes with the truth they thought would stay buried forever. Not for closure, not for forgiveness, but for something far more important. Control. I'll go with you, Evelyn said firmly. I shook my head. No, I need to do this myself. She hesitated. Every instinct in her probably told her to protect me, but she nodded anyway. All right, she said softly. But I'll be close. The drive felt longer than it should have. Every street looked familiar. Every turn carried memories. But instead of comfort, all I felt was distance. Like I was returning to a place that no longer belonged to me. When I finally stood in front of the house, I paused. This house, the place I had called home, where I laughed, where I dreamed, where I believed I was safe. Now it felt empty, cold, like a stage where a lie had been performed for years. I took a deep breath, then knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened, and there she was, the woman who raised me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me. Not with relief, with love, but with something else, surprise. And beneath that, unease. Maya, she said slowly, like she wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't respond right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see my mother. I saw a stranger. "Can I come in?" I asked calmly. She hesitated, just for a second, then stepped aside. The moment I walked inside, memories flooded back. But they didn't hurt the way I expected, because now I knew. They weren't real, not completely. David was in the living room. The second he saw me, he froze. His expression shifted instantly. Shock, guilt, discomfort. "Maya," he started. I raised my hand slightly. "Don't." He went silent. I walked further into the room, standing in the center. Calm, still, in control. "I'm not here to argue," I said. My voice didn't shake, and that alone seemed to unsettle them. "Then why are you here?" the woman asked, her tone defensive again. But I noticed something. She wasn't as confident as before. I turned to face her fully. "I know the truth." The words landed hard, heavy, sharp. Her expression didn't change immediately, but I saw it, that flicker, that moment of fear she tried to hide. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, too quickly. "Yes, you do," I replied. Silence. I stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "You worked at New York General Hospital," I said. Her body stiffened, just slightly, but enough. "You were there the night a baby went missing?" David looked confused now. What is she talking about? I didn't take my eyes off her. "Should I tell him?" I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. "Stop this nonsense," she snapped. But her voice had changed. The control was slipping. "That baby," I continued. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "Was me." The room went completely silent. David stared at me, then at her, then back at me. "What?" he whispered. I finally looked at him. "The woman you cheated on me with," I said slowly, "is not my mother." Confusion spread across his face. "What are you saying?" I turned back to her. She stole me. The words echoed in the room like a gunshot. "No," she said immediately. Too fast. Too sharp. But it was too late. The truth had been spoken. "I took a DNA test," I continued. "I found my real mother." Her face paled. For the first time, she looked afraid. "That's impossible," she whispered. "No," I said calmly. "What's impossible?" "Is thinking you could hide this forever." David stepped back slightly, his mind clearly struggling to catch up. "You kidnapped her?" he asked, looking at the woman like he was seeing her for the first time. She didn't answer, and that silence was everything. I felt something shift inside me again. Not pain, not anger, but release. "You didn't just betray me recently," I said softly. "You built my entire life on a lie." Her eyes filled with something now. Not guilt, not regret, but desperation. "I raised you," she said suddenly. "I took care of you. I gave you everything." I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "Now I know why." She flinched. "You didn't save me," I continued. "You took me." Silence. It's heavy, unavoidable, and in that moment everything between us finally broke. Completely. "I'm done," I said. "No shouting, no tears, just truth. I've filed for divorce," I added, glancing briefly at David. "And I'm taking legal action." That got their attention. "You can't prove anything," she said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. I held her gaze. "Watch me." Then I turned and walked out, not broken this time, not lost, but stronger than I had ever been. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward the truth. The moment I walked out of that house, I knew there was no turning back. Not emotionally, not legally, not in any way that mattered. What had once been a private nightmare was about to become something much bigger, public. And the truth, once exposed, doesn't just change lives. It destroys illusions. The legal process began faster than I expected. Evelyn didn't waste time. Within days, I was sitting in a high-rise office across from one of the most respected attorneys in the city. His calm demeanor and sharp eyes told me one thing immediately. This man didn't lose cases. "This is more than a divorce," he said, flipping through the documents in front of him. "This is a layered case involving fraud, emotional damage, possible abduction, and long-term deception." I nodded slowly. Because for once, someone was saying it exactly as it was. "We'll proceed on multiple fronts," he continued. "Divorce, financial compensation, and reopening the hospital case." My chest tightened slightly. Reopening the case, that meant digging up everything. Exposing everything. "Are you ready for that?" he asked, looking directly at me. I didn't hesitate. Yes. The divorce filing alone was enough to send shockwaves. David wasn't expecting it. Not this fast, not this serious. At first, he tried to reach out, calls, messages, even showing up unannounced at Evelyn's house. "I just want to talk," he said one afternoon.
When I saw him through the gate,
I stood at a distance. "No," I replied. His face looked different now. Not confident, not in control, but desperate. "I made a mistake," he said, his voice strained. "We can fix this." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd it sounded. "A mistake?" I repeated. "You didn't forget to take out the trash, David. You slept with my mother," he flinched. But I wasn't done. And not just any woman, the one who stole my life. That shut him up completely. The court proceedings began 2 weeks later, and from the very first day, it was intense. The courtroom was packed. Not just with lawyers and officials, but with people, observers, journalists, because somehow the story had leaked. A pregnant woman betrayed by her husband and mother, only to discover she was kidnapped as a baby. It sounded unbelievable, but it was real. I sat beside my lawyer, my hands resting gently on my stomach. Evelyn was right behind me, a steady presence, a silent support. Across the room, David sat with his attorney. He avoided my gaze completely, and next to him, the woman who raised me. She looked composed, too composed, like she was still holding on to the belief that she could control the narrative. But I knew better. Because the truth doesn't bend forever. Eventually, it breaks through. The judge entered. The room fell silent. And just like that, everything began. The first phase focused on the divorce. Evidence was presented. Messages, timelines, witness accounts. Every detail of the affair was laid out. Clear, undeniable, brutal. I didn't look at David while it was happening. I didn't need to. Because I already knew everything. But what I didn't expect was how quiet he became. No defense, no excuses, just silence. And that silence spoke louder than anything he could have said. When it was my turn to speak, the room felt heavier. Every eye was on me. Every breath felt amplified. "Tell the court what happened," my lawyer said gently. I took a deep breath and began. I told them everything. The pregnancy, the growing discomfort, the day I walked into that room. My voice didn't break. Not this time, because I wasn't telling the story as a victim anymore. I was telling it as someone who survived. "And how did it make you feel?" the judge asked. I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had too many. "Like my entire life had been a lie," I said finally. The room went still. And then I found out it actually was. That moment changed everything. Because now, this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about truth. The second phase of the case shifted focus, my identity. The DNA results were presented, official, verified, unquestionable. Gasps spread quietly across the room. Even people who had come for drama weren't prepared for this level of reality. Evelyn was called to testify. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger. "I never stopped looking for her," she said, and in that moment, I saw something in her I hadn't fully understood before. Not just love, but loss, a lifetime of it. Then came the turning point. The investigation report. The private investigator had done his job, thoroughly, relentlessly. Employment records, hospital logs, witness statements from former staff, and then, the final piece. A document placing the woman who raised me inside the maternity ward at the exact time I disappeared. Silence, heavy, explosive. All eyes turned to her. For the first time, she looked shaken. Her lawyer stood quickly, objecting, denying, trying to dismantle the evidence. But it wasn't enough, because the truth had structure now. Proof, foundation. David looked at her like he didn't know her anymore, and maybe he didn't, because the woman he thought he understood was someone else entirely. By the end of the session, nothing was the same. The judge adjourned the court, but not before saying something that echoed in my mind long after we left. This case is far from over, and he was right. Because what had started as betrayal was now becoming justice. If you're enjoying this story, comment below Justice for Maya and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. The courtroom felt different that day, heavier, final. Like everyone present understood that what was about to happen wouldn't just close a case. It would close a chapter of lives that had been built on lies, betrayal, and silence. I sat quietly, my hands resting over my stomach, feeling my baby move gently beneath my palm. That small movement grounded me, reminded me that no matter what happened in that room, I still had something pure, something untouched by all the darkness. Evelyn sat beside me this time, closer than before. Not just as support, but as family. Across the room, everything had changed. David looked exhausted. The confidence he once carried was gone, replaced by a tired, hollow expression. His eyes no longer avoided mine, but when they met there was nothing left in them. No love, no pride, just regret. And then there was her, the woman who raised me, the woman who stole me. She sat upright, dressed neatly, trying to maintain control. But I could see it now, the cracks, the fear she could no longer hide, because this time there was no escaping the truth. The judge entered, and the entire room stood. When we sat again, the silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm. This court has reviewed all presented evidence, the judge began. His voice was steady, clear, unshakable. Every word mattered now, every second carried weight. Regarding the divorce proceedings, my heart slowed, not from fear, but from readiness. The court finds clear evidence of marital misconduct. A quiet murmur spread across the room. The defendant, David, is hereby ordered to provide full financial support for the child, along with additional compensation for emotional and psychological harm caused during the plaintiff's pregnancy. I didn't react immediately. Not outwardly, but inside, something released, not joy, not satisfaction, but closure. David lowered his head, completely, like the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. But the judge wasn't finished. As for the additional claims presented in this case, the room grew still again. The court acknowledges the overwhelming evidence suggesting the unlawful removal of a newborn child from New York General Hospital over 2 decades ago. My breath caught slightly, even though I already knew the truth. Hearing it spoken in a courtroom made it real in a different way. While this court does not issue criminal sentencing, the judge paused. It formally refers this matter for immediate criminal investigation. That was it. The moment everything shifted permanently. The woman who raised me didn't react right away, but I saw it. That brief flicker of panic. The realization that this wasn't just about losing control anymore. It was about consequences. Real ones. She stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her composure finally breaking. "I raised her! I gave her a life!" Her voice echoed in the courtroom, but this time, no one was listening. Because the truth had already spoken louder. "You took that life," I said quietly. She turned to me, her eyes filled with something desperate now. "You wouldn't even be here without me." I held her gaze, calm, unshaken. "No," I said. "I would have been somewhere else, with a mother who never stopped looking for me." Silence. That was the moment she lost. Not just the case, but everything. Security stepped in shortly after, guiding her back down as her voice grew louder, more frantic. But it didn't matter, because the world had already seen her for who she truly was. Outside the courtroom, the atmosphere exploded. Journalists, cameras, questions flying from every direction. How does it feel to win the case? What do you have to say about the shocking revelations? Do you forgive them? I stopped walking, just for a moment, because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about what I had survived, what I had uncovered, and what I had become. "I didn't win anything," I said calmly. "I just found the truth, and then I walked away." The days that followed were overwhelming. News outlets picked up the story quickly. A woman betrayed by her husband and mother discovers she was kidnapped as a baby. It spread everywhere. David's life collapsed almost instantly. Friends distanced themselves. Business partners cut ties. His reputation, once solid, was destroyed. But the worst part for him wasn't the public shame. It was the silence. Because now, he had to live with what he had done, without excuses, without distractions, and for the woman who raised me, it was worse. The investigation moved fast. Too fast for her to control. Old colleagues were questioned, records were reopened, connections were traced, and piece by piece, her past came undone. I didn't follow every detail. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't focused on what I had lost. I was focused on what I had gained. Evelyn, my real mother. Our relationship didn't magically become perfect overnight. It couldn't. Too much time had passed. Too many years lost. But there was something real between us, something strong. Every morning, she would check on me. Every evening, we would talk. Not about the past, but about now. And slowly, we built something new. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but out of truth. The day my daughter was born, everything changed again. I held her in my arms, tears streaming down my face, not from pain, but from something deeper, relief, love, healing. Evelyn stood beside me, crying quietly as she looked at her granddaughter. "It feels like a second chance," she whispered, and for the first time in my life, I understood exactly what she meant. Because this time, nothing was built on lies. Everything was real. Healing didn't happen overnight. Despite everything that had been exposed, despite the justice, the truth, the new beginning, I still carried the weight of what I had lost. Some wounds don't disappear just because the truth comes out. They stay, quiet, hidden, waiting for moments of silence to remind you they're still there. Motherhood became my anchor. From the moment my daughter was placed in my arms, everything inside me shifted in a way I couldn't fully explain. The world that had once felt broken suddenly had meaning again. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine like she was holding on to me just as tightly as I was holding on to her. "You're safe," I whispered to her one night as she slept peacefully beside me. But deep down, I was also saying it to myself. Evelyn became a constant in my life. Not just as my biological mother, but as someone who was trying every single day to rebuild something that had been taken from both of us. She didn't try to force closeness. She didn't overwhelm me with affection. Instead, she showed up in small ways, quiet ways, real ways. She would sit with me during late nights when the baby wouldn't sleep. She would bring me tea without asking. She would listen when I spoke and respect my silence when I didn't. And slowly, without pressure, without expectations, she became home. Still, there were moments that caught me off guard. Simple things, like seeing a mother and daughter laughing together in public, or hearing someone casually talk about childhood memories. Moments like that reminded me of everything I had missed, everything that had been stolen from me before I even had the chance to understand it. But instead of breaking me, those moments began to shape me. "I can't change the past," I told Evelyn one evening as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset. She nodded gently. "But you can choose what comes next." And for the first time, I believed that. Time passed. Slowly at first, then faster. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My daughter grew. Her laughter filled the house. Her presence filled spaces I didn't even know were empty. And with every passing day, I found myself breathing a little easier, sleeping a little better, smiling a little more, until one day, something unexpected happened. It was at one of Evelyn's charity events. She had insisted I come, not for appearances, but to gently reintroduce me to the world outside my pain. "You don't have to stay long," she said. "Just come for a little while." The event was elegant, soft music, warm lighting. Conversations flowing easily between people who seemed to belong in that space. I didn't feel like I belonged, not at first. I stood quietly near the edge of the room, holding a glass of juice, observing more than participating. That's when I noticed him. He wasn't trying to stand out. In fact, he seemed completely comfortable staying in the background, helping staff, greeting guests politely, and stepping aside when attention shifted elsewhere. There was something calm about him, something steady, and then our eyes met. For a brief moment, neither of us looked away, not in a dramatic way, not in a romantic cliché, just recognition. He walked over slowly, giving me enough time to turn away if I wanted to. Hi, he said gently. Hi, I replied. I don't think we've met before, he added. No, I said. I don't think we have. I'm Michael. His voice was calm, warm, easy to listen to. Maya. He smiled slightly, not overly confident, not forced, just genuine. We talked. At first, it was simple. Small things, the event, the weather, nothing important. But then something shifted. He didn't ask intrusive questions, didn't push for personal details, but somehow the conversation felt deeper. Like he was listening, not just hearing. You don't seem like you enjoy these kinds of events, he said at one point. I laughed softly. Is it that obvious? Only a little, he smiled. There was no judgment in his voice, no assumptions, just understanding, and that alone made me feel comfortable. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. We didn't exchange numbers that night. There was no dramatic ending, no promises. But as I left the event, I realized something. For the first time since everything happened, I had spoken to someone new. Without fear, without pain, without carrying the past into every word. And that meant something important. Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet moments like that. Moments where you realize you're starting to feel like yourself again, even if you don't fully recognize that version yet. As I held my daughter that night, watching her sleep peacefully, I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like my life was moving forward. Not away from the pain, but beyond it. Never happened, but it reshaped it, softened the edges, turned sharp memories into quiet reminders of how far I had come. My daughter became the center of my world. Her laughter filled every corner of the house. Her tiny footsteps echoed through rooms that once felt too big, too empty. And every time she called me Mom, something inside me healed just a little more. Evelyn became more than just my biological mother. She became my mother in every way that truly mattered. We built something real together, not forced, not rushed, but steady. There were mornings we spent talking over coffee, afternoons filled with laughter as we watched my daughter play, evenings where silence wasn't uncomfortable, but peaceful. And sometimes we would simply sit together, knowing that after everything we had lost, we had found each other again. Michael didn't rush into my life, and that's what made the difference. After that first meeting, we crossed paths again and again. Each time, the connection grew, slowly, naturally. He never asked me to open up before I was ready, never tried to fix me, never made me feel like I was broken. Instead, he listened, he showed up, he stayed consistent. And over time, I found myself trusting him. Not because I forgot what I had been through, but because he gave me no reason to fear what could come next. He treated my daughter like she mattered. Not as an obligation, not as something to accept, but as someone to love. He would sit with her, read to her, make her laugh in ways that felt effortless. And every time I watched them together, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. One evening, as we sat outside watching the sunset, he turned to me. I know you've been through a lot, he said quietly. I looked at him, not afraid, not guarded, just present. And I'm not here to replace anything, he continued. I just want to be part of what you're building now. His words settled deep inside me, because that was exactly what I needed, not someone to erase my past, but someone willing to stand beside me in my future. And slowly, without pressure, without fear, I let him in. Love didn't come rushing back. It didn't sweep me off my feet. It grew, quietly, steadily, strong, until one day I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of love, not of trust, not of what could go wrong, because I had already survived the worst, and I was still standing. 3 years later, Michael asked me to marry him. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple, real. We were at home. My daughter was playing nearby. The evening light filled the room. He knelt down, holding a small ring in his hand. "I don't promise perfection," he said, "but I promise honesty. I promise respect, and I promise to choose you every single day." Tears filled my eyes. Not from fear, not from uncertainty, but from something deeper. Certainty. "Yes," I whispered, and this time it felt right. Our wedding was nothing like my first. There were no secrets. No hidden truths, no illusions, just love, pure, honest, uncomplicated. Evelyn walked me down the aisle, her hand in mine, her eyes filled with tears. And for the first time in my life, that moment felt complete. As I looked around the room, I noticed something. The people who once hurt me were gone, no shadows, no reminders. Just the people who truly belonged in my life. And as I stood there, about to begin a new chapter, I realized something powerful. Losing everything had given me the chance to build something real. Not perfect, but true. And that made all the difference, because in the end, it wasn't about what I lost. It was about what I chose, and I chose a real family, a loving husband, and a life built on truth. Epilogue years later. I heard her name again, not in whispers, not in rumors, but in headlines. I didn't go looking for the update. I didn't follow the case obsessively. Because at some point, I stopped needing closure from her. But the truth has a way of resurfacing. The investigation had continued quietly behind the scenes, digging deeper, uncovering more. And eventually, they found what they needed. More evidence, more witnesses, more connections tying her directly to what happened all those years ago. She was arrested. Not just for what she did to me, but for everything connected to it. Fraud, identity falsification, abduction. The woman who built her life on deception was finally exposed completely. I remember sitting in the living room when I saw the news. My daughter was playing on the floor. Michael was beside me. Evelyn stood quietly near the window. No one said anything at first, because we all understood what that moment meant. Not victory, but finality. "She'll never hurt anyone again," Michael said softly. I nodded, but my thoughts weren't on her anymore. They were on something else, something more important. I looked at my daughter, her laughter, her innocence, her future, and just glad something. The cycle had ended, the pain, the lies. The stolen life, it stopped with me. Because I chose differently. I chose truth. I chose love. I chose to break what was broken. Evelyn walked over slowly, placing her hand on my shoulder. "You did that," she said quietly. I shook my head gently. "No," I replied. Then I looked at my daughter again. "We did." And in that moment, everything felt complete. Not because the past disappeared, but because it no longer had power over me. And that was the real ending. Thank you for staying to the end of this beautiful and mind-blowing story. I really hope you enjoyed every bit of it. Comment below where you're watching from and your thoughts on the story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories like this. Lots of love from Tales of the Heart by Ray.